Hello, everybody. I am Nadir Will Rule, and welcome to the Disney Debate Elseworlds month, where we are broadcasting from a different dimension. Where, for some reason, I am called Nadir Will Rule, and here are my cohorts, my partners in crime. With me once again is ZDStaller.
Yes, I am ZDStaller. I am from an alternate dimension. I have a goatee, and I am a fan of the New York Rangers.
And to my right, in the other dimensional space, is Dog MacIrish. How's it going?
Quack!
The majestic dog duck.
So noble.
So hello everybody. We are here once again to talk about Disney films and Disney products. As you guys may have figured out from the last episode, this is the beginning of Elseworlds month. This is the dimensions where, instead of the Disney films, we got something completely different. And so we're taking one of the Disney films that we've covered on this show before, and we are going to talk about an alternate version of it for the next 4 episodes. So, first of all, we decided upon each person would pick a film that a major studio created, and we wanted to start off with alternate universe versions of Snow White, which is the first Disney film, the first film that we covered on this show. Not the first episode, but the first Disney film that we covered on the show, and talk about alternate takes on that. And each of us picked a film, and some of the results were different, to say the least.
Understatement of the century.
Yeah, but before we get into the 4 films that we're going to be covering for this month, how are you two doing today?
I'm annoyed that we just watched a horrible, shitty movie, only to watch another horrible, shitty movie. And I can't decide which one is more horrible, and which one's more shitty, and which one pisses me off more. And I blame Eric. You suck, Eric.
I have prepared a statement.
Damn well better.
When we first decided to do Elseworlds month and we picked different suggestions, I suggested Mirror Mirror, simply because I was thinking either this film or Snow White and the Huntsman. I thought Mirror Mirror would be the lesser of two evils. I was wrong. Then again, when it is coming from the director who, to give this one clue, ask me what it means. Ask me what it means. When you got that guy directing this film, and upon watching this and and stepping away from it, I realized I'm confused. It made me very confused. Which was basically the exact same reaction I got after watching Maleficent, but that's different. So, in any event, I apologize in advance, but I'm still so confused.
So, the 4 films that we are covering for this month, in order, and this is just random order, because each of us chose one film, and it ended up being the worst films first. So today we're covering Mirror Mirror. Next time we're covering Snow White and the Huntsman. Then we're going to be covering Huntsman Winter War, which is the sequel. And there is a story behind this, and I'll get to it in a sec. And after that, we're going to round it out with Happily Ever After. Now, the story behind Elseworlds month, which I wanted to talk about because this was actually rather interesting for me. I was working on starting the Fast and the Furious reviews. This was back before I even did the first Fast and Furious episode. and I put in the Blu-ray because I have this big Blu-ray pack. And the thing that Universal does on their Blu-rays, which is rather interesting, is that instead of having trailers directly on the Blu-ray, they have Live BD, which streams trailers out of a collective of modern trailers that are going around. So you're always getting new trailers, even from the Blu-rays that you owned for years, which is, I think, is a very interesting feature. So every time I put in a new Fast and the Furious film from this feature, I get a new trailer. One of the trailers featured was Huntsman Winter War, which at the time I had no idea that there was even a sequel to Snow White and the Huntsman. So I messaged Kat and Doug and Eric, and I said, guys, this is an odd request, but can we watch this and talk about it for the show?
And I told you were insane, and I hated you.
You always say I'm insane, and I am, but here we are today.
I just think it's a rather interesting concept because while our show is the Disney debate and we talk about Disney stuff, it is interesting to see how other studios take stuff that Disney has already done, like Snow White and Peter Pan and whatnot, and see what other studios have done with that same material. So, I mean, I'm thinking that if this goes over well with fans after the end of Elseworlds month, I would love doing this again next year with different things.
Yeah, I think this would be a good thing to do maybe once a year or for special occasions, something to see something a little bit different from what Disney is offering, but still based on Disney. And if this goes over well, like I think the next one we were talking about was Pinocchio, and God, there's a lot of bad live adaptations of Pinocchio or just adaptations in general, but this is the interesting thing about Disney films is that while they set the stage for a lot of these things, they aren't the only adaptations, and they aren't always the most popular versions of these tales. In many cases, Disney has maybe one or two versions, but there's hundreds of different ideas and different concepts for a different version of these movies out there. And so if you guys like this, let us know, and we will look for next year or in the future to see what we can do for Pinocchio. With that being said, today we are talking about Mirror Mirror, which is a different take on Snow White, like we said. But Mirror Mirror, directed by Tarsem Singh, is something that, once again, I had no knowledge of going into this. And now I wish I had no knowledge of it going out. Kat, can you give us a brief introductory piece on what Mirror Mirror is all about?
Sure. Mirror Mirror is about Julia Roberts wandering onto a set dressed like a princess and demanding that everything be about her. And then, for some reason, Phil Collins asked her, "Hey, can you put my daughter in this? I mean, she can't act, but she looks cute, so she can, act opposite you." And she said, "Sure, she'll be my little bitch that I rag on for the whole film." And then Sean Bean shows up for 5 seconds and disappears. And then we get a bunch of little dwarves who look like they could be part of Cirque du Soleil. And then the Lone Ranger shows up. And then we see a lot of crappy CGI and a lot of more horribleness and awful acting. And I think the plot of Snow White was in there somewhere. I'm pretty certain. And I think Nathan Fillion turns into a bug.
No, Nathan Lane.
Oh yeah, Nathan Lane, sorry. And then Nathan Lane turns into a bug, I think. I won't lie, my mind was all over the place with this fucking movie, and I've been trying to make sense of everything. Ugh. But basically it's the plot of Snow White, just with a few minor differences and a different setting. That pretty much.
So for this film, I mean, I've been traveling down to Jersey to see the debate crew a lot more recently, and this is a film that Kat and we sat down and we watched. I was down there. We were gonna be going out to do something for my birthday, so we went down to watch it, and I remember thinking, you know what, this I don't think this will be that bad. I found the movie, downloaded, got on my computer, we sat down to watch it on the TV, and slowly parts of my soul died inside.
Oh, yeah. My soul, my brain, my sense of reality and rationale, and many other things. Like, I'm pretty certain I ceased to exist at one point before I willed myself back into existence.
Yeah. The thing is, we've seen a lot of bad films, especially recently for this podcast. We don't intentionally seek out bad things we just pick stuff at random, and somehow a lot of the stuff lately has been very bad.
If I may quote Nathan Lane, they always come here. How did they find me?
It's just one of those things where, like, we've had a lot of bad stuff in a row. With Shaggy Dog Month, we didn't know what to expect at all, and we set our hopes up way too high for the sequels. And a lot of the modern films that we've seen from Disney, such as the 2006 Shaggy Dog, Maleficent, and today's offering, they've just been bad for seemingly different reasons. And granted, we've grown a little bit tolerant of badness, but this is kind of a unique bad. We know Tarsem Singh as the director that, says, ask me what it means. He makes films that he wants you to question with very weird imagery, very weird design. But unlike something like Tim Burton or something that has weird imagery and is grounded in a sense of structure, Tarsem Singh, from what I've gathered, and I've only seen this film, he seems to just do stuff at random. And as a problem, the film does not flow as a film. It does not feel like a film. It doesn't feel like it has any act structure. Now, I say this a lot on my show and on the show in general, but films usually have a 3-act structure. It doesn't always have to follow this, and some of my favorite films, such as Memento doesn't even have that 3-act structure. It has segments and it brings things to you in bits and pieces, but it's told that way for a specific purpose. It's done that way to make a point. With this film, I feel like there's a lot of random ideas just thrown at the viewer, just to say, to make it seem a lot more important than it actually is. And before we actually talk about the story, let's discuss this for just a second. Kat, what do you think about this director? Like, I don't know if you've seen any other Tarsem Singh works, but this is my first again, and it feels like there's a lot of things that are just slapped and like slapping you in the face, and it feels like it should be more important than it actually is.
I can't really say I've seen any of his other stuff. I mean, I know about The Cell and Immortals and everything, but I mean, based on what I've seen of this movie, this movie doesn't seem to have his usual, like, weirdness. Well, it does, but in a different way. Because, what his usual weirdness that I've seen of, those other films is it makes you question it, but it's also, like, creepy. Whereas in this movie, it's weird, but it's, comedic. And I think that's kind of, like, what makes this film, like, a bit, what's the word I'm looking for?
Distracting?
Yeah, a bit distracting. Like, it's kind of all over the place, because the whole thing, it's supposed to be it feels like it's supposed to be like a fantasy adventure type thing, but then they make it then they make it a comedy, and then they try to throw some dark twists in there, and it just, I don't know, I can't really think of like a theme for it. It's just so weird, which I guess fits his style, but it's not even a definitive weird. And but definitely, one thing I could tell for certain, that there's a lot of Bollywood influence in this movie. Like,
Oh yeah.
especially at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Like with the bright colors, with the cheesy, over the top acting, and the cheesy like CGI and sound effects and everything, and music and costumes and makeup. Like, it's you could tell definitely Bollywood had an influence on this film, and it's just, ugh, it leaves a bad taste in my mouth. Nothing against Bollywood films. I have nothing, I don't care about them one way or another, but for this film, for this story, it's just, ugh, it's just distasteful for me.
What do you think of this, Eric? In that same vein.
I just feel like it just doesn't mesh very well. Because, I mean, a lot of the visuals, I mean, don't get me wrong, a lot of the visuals and stuff, I mean, they are interesting. They are interesting in and of it by itself. Like, some of the set designs and the costume designs are interesting in of itself. However, when they all come together, it kind of just becomes it just feels like a jumbled mess. Like, I remember there were some like weird camera angles in like the first couple of minutes, like when we first see Snow White, and I just thought I'm like, what was the point of those? What was the point of those angles? Like, it just shifted my attention all over the place, and it just doesn't make any sense. As far as the comedy in this film goes, like, and I think it was trying to be a comedy, but 99% of the jokes fell flat. There may be like one, maybe two that I kind of liked that was in the third act, but I think even as it trying to be like a weird comedy, it kind of falls flat on itself. Like, it knows it has a setup and a punchline, but like you kind of you see the punchline, but you kind of miss the setup because you're just distracted by all other things that are going on, whether it's the weird costumes or the awkward acting. And I don't think the director kind of understood how comedy kind of works, kind of like how the directors in the Super Mario Brothers movie don't know how comedy works. But this movie just really felt all over the place. It not so much that it didn't know what it wanted to be, as so much it didn't know what elements would have worked to help the flow of the movie better.
I agree. I mean, I definitely agree that he doesn't know what jokes are. A lot of the things there, like, you can tell they're meant to be a joke, but they end up coming across as like ideas, or like halfway there. Like, there's setup, but there's no punchline. For example, there's the seven dwarves don't have the traditional names. One of them is named Grimm, I guess to reference the Grimm fairy tales, and then later in the epilogue, he wrote the fairy tales, and one of them is Napoleon, and he is literally he's supposed to be Napoleon Bonaparte, like he's French, and they follow in that same vein, but it's just like they're references, but they don't do anything funny with those references, and like one of them is Chuckles. He's supposed to be funny, and he's not. So like there are little things like that where I feel like there's a setup but no punchline. But let's talk about the story. Let's actually talk to you guys about what's going on in this mess of a film. So, this film, kind of like Maleficent, is not as focused on Snow White as most of the other films usually are. this film is very focused instead on the evil queen, which, to be fair, in the original Snow White, the evil queen was a major part of the focus. She was the driving force. But I think the problems start with what they did to the evil queen, because she's not just evil anymore. She is just very vaguely, she's petty and jealous, but she's vain. Like, they really play up her vanity and how she wants to be beautiful and stuff like that. Like, they give this whole scene where she goes through her beauty regiment, and it's all, like, this different goop that they put on her, and, like, they do all this other gross stuff, which was straight out of a horror film.
Oh god, I got so nauseous during that scene. And actually, you know what I found out? All of those beauty regimens, they're actually real.
Yep.
Yeah.
People actually smear bird shit on their face and use bees to sting their lips to make them more poofy, and they stick their hands in maggots, and oh god, it's so fucking disgusting. Ugh.
I mean, I would never do anything like that with maggots. I know that some people use, like, fish to smooth their feet to bite off the dead skin, and I'm just like, just use shea butter or, like, something.
Use a file. What is wrong with using a file? Dear God.
So we have a lot of these scenes dedicated to her really beautifying herself. And the main crux at the end for her is that the price of all her evil deeds using all this magic was to age. And it feels like it's trying to be more about the queen wanting to be beautiful, because she doesn't transform herself into the old woman, but it's a weird roundabout way.
Well, there's actually another thing kind of driving her in this film. There's the fact that because of her vanity and her desire to beautify herself and make herself, like be basically the queen of high society, is that she basically spent the kingdom's fortune on frivolous things, and now she needs to find a way to, to pay off her debt, and part of that is by marrying into another kingdom that has more riches and taxing the hell out of her people. So we have those driving forces, which is a nice little change of pace for the story for once, instead of her just being motivated purely by her vanity. But even so, I mean the whole thing with the magic doesn't really come into play till later, and and I kind of feel like it's wasted a bit, because it's like, oh, you keep saying there's a price for me using this magic. What is it? I'm like, isn't it freaking obvious?
It's very on the nose with this whole, like, thing, like, oh, she's very, very vain, she uses up all her magic, like, in the mirror, which I'll get to in a second, the mirror keeps warning her, well, magic comes with a price, you can't keep using it and expect nothing in return. That's, like, the one thing Tarsem actually, like, lays on so thick that you're like, we get it.
Yeah, I'm even wondering if she would have used magic if she knew what it would result in, despite how obvious it was.
Well, I think at that point she didn't. I mean, I don't think she cared. It's like she was more driven by the fact of doing whatever it is, whatever the cost, to try to get what she needed, which was to be beautiful and spend lavishly and get all these nice things and stuff. So I think with her character, she didn't care whether, what the price is, what the actual price is and what will actually do to her. I think she kind of knew, like, over time, and it's an interesting concept, the whole, you use magic and you age faster. It's something that fiction has done multiple times with different stories, but I just feel like with The Wicked Queen that they could have done so much more. Like, they actually could have had fun with this. And I remember seeing the trailer years ago, and I'm like, oh, Julia Roberts being a queen, but she's kind of being funny. and I felt there was a lot of wasted potential here. Like they could have had so much fun. They could have had so much fun with it, and they could play off the humor with it very, very well. But a lot of that got wasted. Heck, they could even tie the magic in a little bit, with some of the jokes. But it felt like, and there was a lot of that throughout this movie where they had some interest. To be fair, they had some interesting ideas, but I felt like they didn't utilize. They didn't use it to its fullest potential.
I can agree with you there. Like, a lot of the ideas were very much like, okay, I can see this functioning on paper, but in practice, it tends to be very weird. And I think where I first started noticing it was how the film opened up, where the Queen is telling the story. The Queen is the one narrating everything. And it's fine for the first 5 minutes. Like, the first little bit where she's just like, okay, this is a story of Snow White, and she's narrating, and I'm just like, oh, so they're making it from the Queen's perspective. Like, how is this going to function? And then she basically says, oh, this is my story, and she starts cracking jokes, but they're not really jokes. Like, she says, oh, everyone danced and sang all day in the kingdom because they had nothing better to do, and I'm like, is that supposed to be satire, or is that supposed to be...
I kind of feel like the opening could have been like an episode of CinemaSins, because that's kind of what it felt like. It was
Queen
basically
could have been good at CinemaSins.
I know, like she was basically pointing out all the little inconsistencies and and flaws in the story, and she's like, oh, and it's my story now. Here's what's wrong with it, and I'm just like, why are you narrating your own story and making fun of it? Like, I was confused when it opened up with her narrating, because I'm like, okay, so this is being told from the Queen's point of view, but then why do we get shots, purely with Snow White by herself, or with the side characters by themselves?
How did you know about the parts you went there for?
Exactly!
Look, if we were going to open up that can of worms, then it's going to be with, like, every single movie that has a narrator. It's like, how do you know this stuff if you weren't there? It's like, look, that's opening Pandora's box right there. I mean, if we do that, the whole thing is just going to fall apart, but...
I mean, it's different because there's no Greek chorus, and I'm going to compare this to Hunchback, and I know we aren't at Hunchback, but the thing is, Clopan in Hunchback is the Greek chorus. He is basically supposed to represent the audience point of view, and he's supposed to like just really recur throughout the film, and that's why he's playing multiple different characters. But here, this is supposed to be a set character, a set narrative. I don't think the Greek chorus works in that sense, especially because we never really see any other point of view about this queen. All we see is her being this stupid, whiny little bitch.
So basically, Julia Roberts.
Post-Oscar. But I mean, but once again, as I was saying, like, if the whole movie was originally from the Queen's perspective, then that also could have been a great opportunity. That also could have been a great opportunity to kind of play off on that. Once again, kind of have fun with it. But they didn't go in that direction, and like they could have done so much more with that. Like, they could have played more with her personality and have a little funny stuff that she does. That have all the funny stuff that she does. So that was, to try to keep up with her appearance, as well as like her personality, about how ruthless she is, and like they could play up with a lot of the humor with that. But once again, they failed to do so.
It's almost like they wanted to go the Maleficent route, but they decided not to. And we have this weird middle ground where it's not entirely about the evil queen, but it kind of is. And yet, like, they don't even give us too many reasons of why she is the way she is. And granted, the Disney version didn't either. But here's the thing. If you're not going to give us a reason, then why have the point of view be on her as the main character? Because Snow White doesn't appear in the film very often. And a lot of the point of view shots are of her in the mirror. And I suppose now is a good time to bring up the main change with the mirror. So, you know how in the original the magic mirror is on the wall and she talks to it and it's just a talking mirror? Here she walks inside the mirror. So already I'm just like, what is this, Oculus? And she goes into this this mirror dimension, if you will. And inside this dimension is another mirror that reflects herself. Like, it is basically just a reflection of herself, and it tells her things, and it's very, very vague, and it warns her not to do things, but she does it anyway. It's just like, first of all, I have several questions. Okay. If you're inside of a mirror, why is there another mirror inside the mirror?
Yeah, that made no goddamn sense. Like, like when I first saw that, I'm like, okay, well, so she's gonna go into the mirror and meet like the physical manifestation of the being in the mirror. But no, it's like she just goes into a separate room to talk to the mystical being who is in another mirror. I'm like, it feels like there's an extra step in here that doesn't need to be here.
They need to cut out the middleman.
Yeah.
It's like they saw Inception and said, you know what, I can go one level deeper. I heard you like mirrors, so I put a mirror in your mirror, bro.
And the thing is, like, the mirror, like, being is not creative in the least. It's just herself with, like, some powdery makeup thrown on. Like, what is the point? Like, she's just talking to herself? Does the being always look like her? Does it look like her because it knows that is what will appeal to her? I don't get it. Like, there are so many ways you could portray the being in the mirror, like, not just in the Disney version. There's, like, infinite possibilities. I've seen them done in other mediums. It just, why just have it be herself? Could nobody really come up with anything more creative? Like,
And why couldn't we just have her talking to her reflection or just talking to the being in the mirror in the real world?
yeah. Like, why go into that whole other mystical room that has no real purpose? It's basically a walk-in closet. She could have just walked into her closet.
I also have another question, and I think this is something that really, really needs to be addressed. Why do you even have this mirror and ask it questions if you're not going to listen to it?
Well, it's the equivalent of those army guys who enlist in the help of scientists, but then totally disregard everything they say so they can blow things up faster.
It's like, I'm going to use this mirror to advise me, and it keeps saying, oh, you shouldn't keep using this magic, like, why don't you actually do something right? And the mirror basically says, you don't have any money, you've squandered it all away, why are you continuing to do this? And she's just like, you know what, no, I need to get more money, they aren't worshipping me enough. And the mirror seems to really spite her. It punishes her in random ways, like when her lackey does something wrong, instead of killing him, she goes to the mirror and says, just punish him, do something that won't kill him. And the mirror turns him into a cockroach. And I'm just like, well, he's as good as dead. Like, you won't know where he is. You just lost your right-hand man. And the mirror said beforehand, like, you're gonna punish your right-hand man? Like, that's your lackey. That's the one who's reporting to you. The one person who actually does what you say.
I mean, to be fair, he did sort of betray her, so he had it coming. But, I mean, the way she did it, like, it's not like there was any reference or any, like, setup to him being turned into a cockroach. Nor is there any real, any change or different results like that come of it. It's like he becomes a bug, he's a bug for about like 10 minutes, and then he's human again. And he goes right back to kissing her ass. It's like, what was the point? This probably wasn't the case, but it came to my mind that they were making a producer's reference where Nathan Lane as Max Bialystock is trying to look for the worst play ever written, and he comes across a play about a man who wakes up one day to find that he's turned into a giant cockroach, and he's like, nah, it's too good.
I was actually thinking that when I saw that scene. I'm just like, woke up one morning to discover he's been turned into a giant cockroach. Too good.
Rob Schneider is the cockroach. The thing is, the mirror is supposed to be the crux of the film. The mirror itself is supposed to be the main focus of this film, along with the evil queen. But she only goes to the mirror like twice throughout the film. And every single time, the same thing happens, and like the mirror keeps saying, "Oh, using magic has a price." It never, like, they never ask what the price is. They never say, "Oh, I should probably like figure out what's going on." She never questions the mirror. She never actually like has the brain capacity to ask what she's doing and what why the mirror is helping her. We never find out where the mirror came from. Like, there's just so many unanswered questions with the mirror, and the mirror only appears in 2 or 3 scenes, and then again at the end where she goes in front of the mirror, and the mirror says, "Oh, this is the price for getting magic," and we see her later at Snow White's coronation, and she's an old lady. She gives her an apple, and she turns into dust. What?
Yeah. Yeah, we should mention, the big famous scene in Snow White where the queen disguises herself as an old hag and tricks her into eating a poisoned apple, which sends her to sleep, which leads to the infamous kiss. Yeah, that only partially happens in this movie, and it doesn't happen until the very end. But Snow White doesn't eat the apple. She catches on to the scheme right away and, calls the queen out on it, and she just is like, okay, I guess I'm dead now. Because apparently...
I think it was implied that she kind of force-fed the queen the apple because she told her to eat it, and she does take the piece of the apple. I want to assume that she just ate it and then just died, because then all of a sudden, like, the mirror stuff, like, all the mirror world kind of destroys itself, like, self-destructs for some reason, and so...
I just don't...
Yeah, force-feeding poison.
But I don't understand. So, she used magic, she paid the price by becoming old and ugly, and now and for some reason her last resort to make things all better was to trick Snow White into eating this apple, which would presumably kill her. And she doesn't, and so the queen and the mirror implode. What?
Yeah, they didn't set that up very well, but
yeah,
I'm just assuming.
Like, in terms of, like, tacked on details, like, suddenly remembered at the last minute, this takes the cake. Or the apple.
There are so many things about her and her relationship with the mirror and the mirror itself that are just never explained. And it feels like if we had a director's cut, not that I want it, I don't want it, but if we had a director's cut, it maybe, give us some answers to some of these questions, because there's so many things that, like, we get this backstory a little bit, but we never get a reason of, like, how these people met, or why she has the mirror, or why she's, the sequence of events do not help. And every single bit of the way, I'm just wondering, why is the mirror helping her? Is the mirror just a dark reflection of her? Is it just her own power? Like, is this supposed to be symbolic? Explain, movie. Explain. But it never explains, and it ends on this weird note. And the thing is, we never get the most iconic scenes in Snow White, the parts that make it Snow White. There's never a kiss to wake her up from a spell. She's never put under a spell because she doesn't eat the apple. It's almost like they wanted to give agency to Snow White, but instead of giving agency to Snow White, they just made the queen dumb.
Yeah, pretty much. Granted, her scheme to begin with wasn't very smart. It's like, okay, I'm just gonna, up and kill the princess and hope nobody notices. Like, that pretty much is her whole scheme from the get-go. But though, granted, she was a little sneaky about it in terms of disguising herself as an old woman and getting her to, try these poison things. Because I don't know if any of you all know about the original Snow White story, but it's not just the apple she gives her. What She actually visits Snow White 3 times. The first time, she sells her a ribbon and ties it too tightly around her neck, almost choking her. The second time, she gives her a poison comb, which she sticks in her hair and almost dies from that. And then the third time is the apple, which definitely kills her, sort of. So, yeah, at least, granted, Snow White had to be really dumb in those earlier versions, but, yeah, at least the queen tried to be sneaky. With this, she was so transparent, she may as well just been walking around the castle with a giant banner that says Snow White must die. That's how transparent she was.
And all the servants were able to figure it out. Like, when she broke the news to the servants, she's like, "Oh, by the way, Snow White's dead. Boo-hoo. Well, no, we're not gonna have a ceremony, whatever. Just carry on. I don't even care anymore. I don't even care." Like, it's very obvious how she feels. And yeah, she's the queen. They do what she says, but this, you kind of want to be sneaky about this, because if they find out and they revolt on your ass, things are going to be bad.
Yeah, which I'm surprised, honestly, that not more characters in the film did. Because, like I said, a lot of the people, both her servants, the town folks, even her own right hand, hate her. Everybody knows how horrible she is. Everybody knows, the bad shit that she's been doing. And yet they still let her get away with it. There's never a revolt of any kind, except by Snow White and the Dwarves, but everyone else is just kind of there just to look uncomfortable and just obey blindly. It's like, can we get a little character for these people? I mean, I know you're just background NCPs, but come on, a little bit of voicing of your disdain for this person.
A lot of the people in the castle just don't have any personality, and they try to give a little bit to the servants who help Snow White out a little bit. Like, they give her stuff for her birthday and whatnot, but they aren't actually fully fledged characters. They never actually do much or showcase personality, and the only one that they really give any personality to is Nathan Lane's character as the right-hand man, but they try to give him this arc. They try their damnedest to give him an arc of how he doesn't want to do what the queen says, but he does it. It's only one scene where he doesn't want to kill Snow White, but he still goes through with it anyway. He doesn't try to help her. And at the end of the film, when everything's said and done, he isn't punished, and Snow White accepts him back into the castle, and he gets a love interest randomly, at the very last second. And I'm just like, but no, he's a horrible person. At any point, he could have gone against the queen. And yes, he does voice one time that he doesn't want to kill Snow White. But that's it. One small, teensy bit of character, but still, he goes along with it. And I mean, maybe they're saying that his stint as a cockroach changed the way he did things, but if that was the case, after turning into a cockroach, you should have been like, "Oh no, fuck this, I'm out of here." But he doesn't immediately afterwards. That's the thing. There's not any build up to his supposed redemption, and it's so damn weird, because Nathan Lane is a great actor and he's a great comedian. This doesn't work at all.
Yeah, you could have easily replaced Nathan Lane with anybody, and there wouldn't have been a difference. Like, I guess the only difference would be, name recognition. But yeah, Nathan Lane is just wasted in this film. Like, even the jokes he did have just fell so flat, and some of them were quite disturbing. Like when he mentioned how during his stint as a cockroach, a grasshopper took advantage of him. I'm like, ew. Why? Why was that in there? I thought this was for kids.
It clearly wasn't. Oh wow.
Yeah.
All right. Before we talk about the bad too much, I think we should talk about the best part of this film, which is the dwarves.
Yeah, definitely. If I had to pick any good thing about this film, it was the dwarves. Like they got legitimate actors for the dwarves. Like, I was very impressed, and despite the shitty material they were given, they give it their all, and even though like they don't have the same names as the other dwarves, like they still, you could still distinguish them from each other. They each have their own character, and you can easily pick out each one, and they each get their moment to shine, and they're actually really funny. So I was actually quite impressed in terms of how they handle the dwarves. That's the only good only good credit I will give this movie.
Yeah, the dwarves themselves, while they're not given the best material to work with, probably have the funniest lines in the film. And like they are recognizable actors. Like you have that one character from Pirates of the Caribbean. Basically, they're legitimate dwarf actors. But so you have that actor, and some of the other actors are recognizable from other works of media. So like these are recognizable dwarf actors, and they got legitimately good people to play these characters. But I think what works about the dwarves is what they do with them. Instead of being workers in a mine, they're highwaymen. They're thieves. They're basically Robin Hood. And in order to do this, which is legitimately the only idea about the film that works, they use stilts that are made with like high-pressured springs or whatever, so they can bounce around and confuse their enemies to make them feel like they look like giants to any passersby. And for a fantastic world like that, I can imagine people would be scared stiff because you don't know what to expect. And there's this really interesting part of the film where the dwarves teach Snow White to be a thief and to sword fight and all this other stuff. And they say the key to outwitting and outmatching your opponent is to make them think differently. Like you use your disadvantage to your advantage, and you also want to catch them off guard. And so that's why like they really they do a great job of showing how even people with disabilities or differently abled people can use their disability to their advantage. And legitimately, this is the only great point of the film.
Yeah, I did like that part. Although, I should mention I actually watched Blockbuster Buster's review of this film at one point, and one of the things that he did mention kind of stuck with me a bit. I mean, I don't particularly think it's a bad thing, but I guess it does work against the overall thing of the story. The whole thing with the dwarves making Snow White a thief, um, technically goes against her character when you think about it. Because, I mean, here, think about it. The reason Snow White was declared the fairest in the land is because, unlike the Queen, she's actually good and pure of heart. She's kind and caring, and just basically the embodiment of goodness. And but yet here they are teaching her to steal from people, and do all, and sneak around and lie and do all these things that basically the Queen has been doing. So I'm wondering if that kind of defeats the whole purpose of the story of Snow White. I mean, I don't particularly think it does, because I mean, at least it gives Snow White a little bit more to do and makes her more capable and gives her more character. But I don't know. I mean, would she still be considered the fairest in the land if if she robbed a family of four who had like only one like satchel of gold to their name and like that was it?
But they focus in the film, and the film itself is not the best representation of Snow White to begin with, but they do focus upon this in the film. The only time they rob something from the people, they give it back to the people. So they rob Nathan Lane's character, and she forces the dwarves to give it back to the people. So
they also rob the prince, because at one point the prince goes back into the forest to look for them, and her very first mission happens to be robbing him. And
but he was a dick.
Oh yeah, no doubt he was an absolute dick. But I'm saying they went into the woods with the plan that okay, the first person we see that comes through the woods that looks wealthy, we're gonna rob him. That could have been anyone. It could have been a noble family for all we knew who are just trying to make their way across the woods. And plus, we knew that the dwarves said that they were skimming off the top, so it's not like they were being full on Robin Hood and just giving it all to the poor.
At least they had an interesting reason for doing it. The dwarves stated that they were once honest workers, but you can't make an honest wage in that economy because the queen kept taxing the people so much that they couldn't afford to live. And so they turned to thievery, and I think that is an interesting idea. I think that works in the context of this film. Snow White becoming a thief, I thought it was interesting. I like that they gave her a little bit more agency. But at the same time, Snow White is not the most interesting character in this film.
Yeah, honestly, I kind of forgot about her while we were talking about everyone else. She's just so bland and just, so there. Like she's basically the Disney equivalent, like the Disney princess of old, in that she's a plot device. She just gets the plot going, but it's not really her story. Everyone else kind of acts around her to make up for it. And yeah, I can't even really call her a character because she's just there floating from scene to scene. And her line delivery is just so blasé. And actually, I found out something interesting. Apparently, she tried out for the role of Snow White in Snow White and the Huntsman and didn't get the role. Like, let that sink in for a moment. She lost the role to Kristen Stewart. Like, that is how bad she is.
Well, at least it's not as bad as Red Riding Hood or Beastly.
Yeah.
Oh, don't mention Beastly.
We probably will have to cover that at some point.
Eventually.
Neil Patrick Harris couldn't even save that film.
No.
Nope.
No, he couldn't. I saw that movie in theaters. I was ready to walk out in the first 15 minutes of the film.
He doesn't even look bad. He's just bald and has tattoos.
It was so boring. Sorry.
Save the rant for when we get to it.
Okay.
But I will say, as bland as Snow White was, at least I didn't hate her like I hated the prince. I mean, on the one hand, it's good that they actually gave the prince a character and gave him stuff to do. Like, you could definitely say that's something this film has over on the Disney version of Snow White. But he's just so unlikable. He's a total ass, and he's full of himself, and he's misogynistic as well as prejudiced. And granted, he gets an arc later on down the line, but his whole demeanor is just so off-putting. I mean, even the scenes where he's basically the comic relief or the comic foil or whatever, and he's getting the shit smacked out of him and everything. I mean, granted it's funny to watch him in pain, but I don't know, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's the actor or how the actor was portraying the character. I just did not like the prince at all, and I was once again really annoyed that they ended up as love interests, considering they had basically no chemistry together.
Yeah, the prince in general, I thought it wasn't just bland. Like, he was kind of a douchebag. He seemed like a character that they wanted us not to like. And the best parts of the film are when he's put under a spell to love the queen, and so he's lovesick for her. And I'll get to the worst part of that in a second. But the best part is like he's kidnapped by the dwarves, and they're trying to snap him out of the spell, and they just do random things. They don't even try True Love's Kiss, but they start boxing him, like like all the different stuff they come up with. I'm like, oh well, why couldn't the film just be an hour of this? I would watch this.
I could have watched that scene over and over again, him just getting bitch slapped constantly.
There was bitch slapping, and they punched him, and they tried doing a rain dance at one point. And
that was the one point where I was legitimately like, can the film just be about the dwarves?
Yes.
The dwarves, like,
that'll be the next thing Hollywood does. They make a Snow White movie and they center it around the dwarves, or they do a prequel or something. I don't know.
Yes.
We'll call it Dwarves.
And
just
then
because.
And Snow White ends up with one of the dwarves, like she should, in my fanfic.
The worst part about this, though, is that the queen puts him under a spell. And you know how bad it was seeing, Robert Downey Jr. and Tim Allen act like a dog.
I know where this is going.
Seeing an actor that we didn't like and we didn't care about, a character that we hated, acting like a lovesick puppy, and no one is acting like this is an odd thing. Like, he does it in front of an entire kingdom of people at this fancy dress ball, and no one bats an eye. But and there's this inconsistency because the people react to seeing a commoner, but they don't react to seeing a prince act like a dog. You would think they would think this is weird because he's a prince. He should be acting noble, but he's not, and it's so goddamn inconsistent about what it wants to do.
Plus, I don't understand the whole thing with the potion, because, I mean, the queen got the potion from the mirror, I believe. That's what she said, right? She got the she got the potion from the mirror, and again, the whole magic comes at a price, indicating that this is some serious shit she's getting into. Why would the mirror give her a bottle labeled puppy love? Like,
as a prank, as a cruel joke. I
know. Was she purely fucking with her, or because I mean, she couldn't just give her a regular love potion. She had to throw in that little bit. Love wordplay. It's like,
do we need a lawyer? Do we have to specify exactly what we want?
Why wasn't the mirror doing this earlier, fucking around with her? Because that actually would have been even more interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, the Emperor's New Groove, where there's, Empress Yzma, and she's a bumbling evil dictator, but she's still intimidating, even though she has a henchman that foils her plans. And the scene where she picks up a bottle and thinks it's poison, only to find out it's extract of llama. That scene is done well because all the vials are mixed up, and she picks up one and she doesn't realize the label has been peeled back because it looks like poison, but it's really llama. And it's just like, okay, this makes sense. It's a nice setup, a nice payoff, and her reaction is hilarious. Okay. Here we get a bottle from a mirror. The queen doesn't look at the bottle. So she doesn't see that it's puppy love. She just assumes, which is stupid in and of itself. But okay, let's go with it. Let's just go with it. Okay. So she gives it to the guy, and it turns out to be puppy love. She doesn't go back to the mirror to figure it out. She just leaves it.
And it's kind of made all the more worse because they establish at one point that it was the same potion she used on Snow White's father to make him fall in love with her. So I'm wondering, did that happen last time, or was it a more legit potion, or once again did the mirror decide, oh, I'm gonna fuck with her this once and give her a downgraded version of the potion?
And is that why the king turns into the giant monster creature? They never explain that. Basically, throughout the film, like, the queen makes it seem like the king was killed by this evil beast that's lurking around the woods, and it turns out that the beast is under the queen's control. Shocker. And it turns out, another shocker, that the king is the beast. We figured that out within the first 10 minutes, I think.
Yeah, it's pretty much implied. When they said that the king wasn't dead, I'm like, oh, he's clearly the beast then. Because why else would this weird Deus Ex Machina creature be in this movie unless it had a connection to one of the characters? Like,
and it's played by Sean Bean, who
should know better.
Sean Bean technically does die in this film because they say he died, but he comes back. He gets better.
For once.
So that's where Ned Stark was this whole time.
It's odd, to say the least, because they don't do anything with it. They don't do anything, and when she finds out that her father is this beast, and they have to fight to get the dad back, like, this is like the very last bits of the film. The king is barely in this, and when he turns back, like, there's no really big emotional moment. It's just, oh, hi.
Yeah, it's just like, oh, my daughter, it's good to see you. You're so much older now. Oh, you're gonna marry this guy? Okay, let me officiate. Okay. Thanks, Dad. Nice to catch up with you too.
We'll catch up later after the wedding that I have to officiate. Thank you.
So we have these characters. We have the queen is trying to be funny and over the top and failing. We have her assistant, which they try to give an arc and fail. We have majority of the servants who don't do anything, but they try to give them a character with just one scene. We have a mirror which doesn't make sense and is only in a couple scenes, so they don't explain anything. We have the townsfolk who are just randomly around, and we didn't talk too much about them, but they are apparently there, and there's a mayor, and I don't even know why they would have a mayor in a monarchy. They have all these disparaging elements, and it's like, in theory, they could work. In theory, if you take these elements and put them together, like, we're going to give him an arc, and we're going to do this, and we're going to make this funny, we're going to give the dwarves something creative and new, and on paper, yes, it works, but in practice, it is horrible. It is hard to sit through. All of the characters pretty much fail, are bland, or the things that they try to do with them fail miserably, except for the dwarves and that one scene where they punch people in the face. And it's just like the story doesn't add up to be a story. The reason why we were forced to kind of really tell it this way, in past episodes, we don't go character to character for a story. In general, we've just summarized and we've talked about that and then gone into the characters. I think this is one of the few times we've had to actually talk about the characters just to talk about just what the hell is going on with the story.
Like I said, it's a big mess. It's all over the place. It's distracting. It's just it throws everything off. This movie is more of a case of bad directing than it is of bad acting per se, because they had a decent amount of talent in this. I mean, you had Julia Roberts, you had Nathan Lane. I mean, you had a young Armie Hammer. I mean, and some of the dwarf actors are actually decent actors in and of themselves. But it's like what the hell? It's like, ugh.
You were so close. You had the cast, you just didn't have a good script, and you didn't have a good director. But I will say this, though, and I know you touched upon this briefly earlier, but the visuals in this movie are actually really stunning. And I think that's something that's really kind of strange because in general, every single time I have seen the visual elements of this film, I'm just like, I love this world. I love what they did with the lighting and the atmosphere, and they made things seem more grand, and I'm just like, okay, this doesn't feel authentically medieval, but at the same time, it's stylized to the point where I'm just like, I like this world. I think it's interesting. I think it's vibrant. I think they do the colors really, really well. It's a shame that it's attached to this film.
It did win Best Costume Design, by the way, at the Academy Awards, because I had a feeling that, I was actually looking it up, I had a feeling that it did win an Academy Award in something, because I do remember it being nominated for something, and yeah, I was right. It won Best Costume Design, I guess. I mean, except for like when they were playing the human chess in the beginning of the film, and they had that one, had the ships coming out of the I don't know what that was.
A lot of the noble designs were done way too over the top, actually.
Yeah.
Not all of them. Some of them were really well done, but during the party when they were showing like a lot of the nobles in their really weird makeup, I'm just like, the Beauty and the Beast live action film actually got that right.
Mm-hmm.
And this just, no.
Yeah, honestly, I thought the costumes and makeup were really ugly. I'm sorry to say. I mean, you were right in that they definitely do pop, and it feels more like a storybook because everything's so colorful. And again, as I mentioned before, you get that Bollywood feel with everything being sort of exaggerated, but at least it's, it's designed in a way that's memorable and catches your eye. But I don't know, my personal taste, I was looking at those outfits and I'm like, who would ever wear these? These outfits are so hideous. And the headpieces, like, the one guy who dressed up as a walrus looked like he had a giant ball sack on his face. I'm like,
Oh god, the ball with the everyone dressed as animals, and Army Hammer's the only one that's decent because he has like a rabbit ears sticking out, like he's like the March Hare from Alice in Wonderland.
The Queen throws this elaborate ball where everyone is forced to dress like an animal, and you have people like it's so weird. Like, I get masquerade balls, but they go too far. Like, no. It's ridiculous. It is one of the most ridiculous parts of the film, and it's the one scene where they try to give chemistry between the prince and Snow White during this ball, which it doesn't feel like it takes place in Snow White. It shouldn't be part of Snow White, but it does. It's like they try to take Cinderella with the ball scene and put it in there. In fact, there seemed like they wanted to take a lot of the other Disney film ideas and put them together, like Beauty and the Beast, and yet like the king turns into a beast, and they have Cinderella with the ball and all this other stuff that just doesn't work for Snow White, with this crazy masquerade where I don't know, like the costume design for that was weird. We should talk about the music, though. So...
do we have to? Do we really have to?
In previous episodes, we haven't had a lot to talk about for music, because, to be honest, the Shaggy Dog doesn't have any, like, standout musical numbers and stuff, and as we've gone on, like, we've had less and less music to talk about, aside from maybe the animated films. This film has an end song. It is a Bollywood song and dance number. And here's the thing. Like, I like Bollywood. I like their song and dance numbers. And normally there's at least some kind of build-up to them. Like, I'm pretty sure they did something like it in Slumdog Millionaire. Near, like, Jive Ho. Yeah, Jive Ho. In Slumdog Millionaire was a really well-done Bollywood number, and it made sense to the film. Here, during the coronation of the king queen, after the whole scene where they give the queen the apple and whatnot, randomly, all of a sudden, after the queen poofs into dust, Bollywood song number, and I'm like, just comes right the fuck out of nowhere. This film does not know how to end. It has like 3 different like endings, and I kept screaming at it like, just end, just please end. But no, we have random Bollywood dance number, and it's not well sung, it's not well danced. I believe my facial expression was my mouth completely wide open, and me just saying, but what?
Yeah.
That is legit my reaction to this, because it doesn't jive with anything. It doesn't. It's like if at the end of Titanic, after all of the stuff happens, instead of singing like "My Heart Will Go On," we had a random Bollywood song and dance number. That's what it feels like.
It's like if with Return of the King, with its multiple endings, like after Frollo sails off into the distance, so suddenly all the hobbits bust out singing. I mean, oh god, I was like slamming my head against the coffee table. I was watching that. I'm like, wow, they really did that. They went the typical cliche. Because what's a big cliche of every animated kids film that doesn't know how to end? They throw in a musical number at the end. Like, seriously, look at any sort of DreamWorks film or crappy Disney film or whatever, and tell me that doesn't happen often. It's like, okay, we're gonna end, but oh geez, what do we leave off on? Okay, let's dance. Ah yeah, da 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 da. It's just, dear God, I wanted to rip my fucking hair out. That ending, I mean, it was bad enough that it took forever to end, but just to add that on top, I was like, I wanted to die. Ugh.
The worst sin of any film is to make me look at my watch. Because, I mean, like, I do get impatient and I'm a little bit fidgety sometimes, and, you know, I do tend to look at my phone because I get messaged a lot, but in films, I want to be invested. I want to watch. And if a film cannot keep me entertained for an hour and a half where I don't look at my watch once, that's a good film. I must have looked at my watch like 15 goddamn times, and this is not a long movie. It feels it. It feels incredibly long. We got to, I believe it's an hour and 45 minutes, and we got to the hour mark, and I looked at the time on the film, and I'm just like, we still have this much left? Dear God. We were only at the halfway point.
I know, it took Snow White, 45 minutes just to get into the woods? Like, really?
And that's a problem. It takes too long to actually get going for what little there is. We spend a large portion of the time just setting up how the queen is in her own palace. How she's, taxing the money and this and that and the other thing. And I'm just like, can we just move on to the actual Snow White story?
Yes, please, despite how bland it is. I could use that. Anything.
I think now is a good time to ask this question, and I've been having this question in my mind for you guys this entire review. Starting with you, ZDStaller. Do you think the original film is better than this?
What the original Snow White?
The original Disney Snow White. Do you think Do you think the original Snow White that Disney did is better? And do you think this was worth adapting?
I think the only reason why the original Snow White would hold up is because of the music, is because of the songs that it had, and it works with the original Disney version. But with this adaptation, like I said, it had a lot of great ideas. It just had miserable execution, mostly because it had bad directing and and other things. So I think Mirror Mirror had it had interesting things, but it wasn't enough to. But it wasn't really enough to make anything. To make anything of anything really coherent, I should say. Anything that kind of creates, that kind of flows through everything. There's just no sense of flow. It's just like we just go from one set piece to another set piece to another set piece without anything really connecting. Doesn't feel like there's any connection between each of the different scenes, or each of the different set pieces, for that matter. I mean, there's sweeping camera shots in there for no reason, really. For no reason whatsoever. So, mostly just as filler, and that's what it was. And that's what it was for much of this movie. It just felt like filler. With Snow White, it doesn't really... Yeah, you could tell it's, in some parts it's filler, but at least you were enjoying the filler.
Okay, and what do you think, Kat?
Oh, the original superior, no doubt. Like, I for me, there's no comparison. And granted, I may be biased for obvious reasons, but I mean, granted, the original Snow White is not my favorite Disney film, by any means, but I could sit down and watch that a lot more than I could ever watch this film. Like, because I mean, at least the Disney version, it's short, it's concise, it has a consistent theme. You know who the characters are. You know how the story goes. You know what to expect, and it has its own charm. This freaking movie, while it attempts to do things differently, just botches it so bad in some parts, and all the good stuff is just overshadowed by the bad just so much. The whole film, it just ends up being infuriating. It's like you had the means, you could have done better, and you didn't. And for that, I will no longer give you my attention. You are not worthy of being acknowledged. So screw this frickin' film. The Disney one is better. That is my degree.
I mean, I know you were so upset with this film that you refused to watch it twice. To put this in perspective, every single film we've watched in the past, Kat has watched twice. Once with me and once with Eric. Here, this is the first time that she has refused to watch a film twice.
I couldn't do it. I couldn't. I refuse. As soon as I was done with Zen, I immediately said, no, I'm not doing this again. Eric is suffering on his own. I want to watch him suffer. I want to hear his wails of agony. I want them to soothe me to sleep. Because God, like, and I mean, granted, I'm a glutton for punishment in general, and I generally like to watch bad films twice just so I can pick up on things I missed the first time, after face palming myself through the back of my skull the first time. But I couldn't do it with this. I couldn't. And I didn't think it was worth the effort. I'm just like, you know what? Screw it. I'm just going to watch Blockbuster Buster's review of this again and read everything off Wiki, and that's it. That's good enough for me. So, yeah, that is how bad this film is. I refuse to watch it again. And I make a decree now, I will never, ever watch that film again in my lifetime. You cannot pay me to watch this piece of shit again.
That's interesting. My take on this is that this film had so many interesting ideas, but the problem was they were lost in translation. I think that they didn't have the right director, they didn't have the right script, they didn't have the right people. They had a good cast, and they had great concepts, but overall, it's just a mess. And it's a bad kind of mess, too, because it's not like the bland kind of mess that I think we're going to be getting with Snow White and the Huntsman, the beastly mess where it's just kind of boring. Here, it's boring, but it also confuses the hell out of me. Like, I'm going to propose something in a minute, but I'm trying to rack my mind to see if this might be the worst film that we've tackled on the show. we've talked about like what constitutes as the worst, and we have all come to the conclusion up until this point that The Shaggy Dog 2006 was the worst film that we've tackled on this show. Before that, it was a toss-up between Maleficent and Savage Sam. And all three of those films do things differently, bad in different ways. I think a big problem with Savage Sam was how bad it's aged over the years and just the direction with that. But when you have something like Maleficent and The Shaggy Dog, these were things that, it can't be aged. Like, it's still very fresh, and I think a lot of it has to do with really bad marketing, really bad direction for the film, and just not caring. Just not caring for The Shaggy Dog. With this, it's a different studio. It's a studio that has no connection to Disney, a studio that has a fresh slate. They didn't have anything to prove. They just needed to make a different adaptation, but it really is badly botched. So I have a proposal. I want to know your thoughts on this. What do you think is worse? The Shaggy Dog 2006 or this film? Kat?
Oh man, that is tough. Like, that is really tough. Oh god. Like, shit. I've been debating this myself because, I mean, unlike this movie, I actually sat through the Shaggy Dog twice, but I kind of wish I hadn't. I really wish I hadn't. It's hard because they're both so bad, but in so different ways. Like, in one way, they have the thing they have in common is that they both completely botched their source material. It's a matter of saying who botched it more, and how annoyed was I by the awfulness. It's such a tough call. I mean, I'm just trying to think. Oh god, I can't even decide.
And I mean, this is not going to be anything definitive because again, it's not Disney. I'm just curious.
Honestly, I think I'm gonna have to go with the Shaggy Dog because at least with Mirror Mirror, I can say that I like the dwarves and they were legitimately the one good thing about the film. With the Shaggy Dog, I can't say anything of that sort. Nothing good about it jumped out at me. So, based on the shit ratio between them, I believe the Shaggy Dog was the shittier film. Like, even if I refuse to watch Mirror Mirror again, it is just about 0.2% less shitty than that film.
Yeah. Eric.
I have to agree with Kat. I think Shaggy Dog was worse because at least with Mirror Mirror they were trying to do something. They were trying to do something different, and I could see that it could have worked well, a lot better. Like, it had a better premise on paper. The Shaggy Dog 2006 was just felt more like a cash grab. It felt more like it was just, oh, let's just remake this and just do this, and this. It felt like every bad, 90s kids film with Shaggy Dog. Like, there was just a lot, to me, it just felt like there was a lot more to just dislike. Like, it just didn't, I just didn't like the idea on paper, let alone letting alone the final product. At least with Mirror Mirror, there was a lot they could have worked with. They could have made a lot more interesting. But with Shaggy Dog, they just completely just threw everything out the window, start from scratch, which is fine if you do it right. But there, it just kind of falls apart.
For me, this is hard. I mean, once again, this is not going to be a definitive worst thing because this is not Disney. I will have to agree with you. The Shaggy Dog does not have anything I like about it. It really shits on the original in so many ways. The same can definitely be said about Mirror Mirror, but Mirror Mirror at least has ideas. It at least has the dwarves. It at least had scenes that I enjoyed. Very small bits and very confusing small bits, but of that two films, I still think the Shaggy Dog 2006 takes the cake for the shit pile or whatever you want to say. It's bad. It's bad. Okay, guys, it's just bad.
Shaggy Dog's bad. The Shaggy Dog's bad.
All right. So next time on the Disney Debate Elseworlds month, we're talking about Snow White and the Huntsman, and I pray to God that it's better than this film.
If it's not, I blame you. Completely.
This is my fault.
I will make you suffer.
But first we have to make Eric suffer.
Oh yeah, definitely.
No.
I'll make you suffer together. You will feel my wrath.
But I think I'll suffer from watching Snow White and the Huntsman because I don't think this is going to be any better.
I mean, at least it'll be more coherent.
Here's hoping.
Do you guys have any final thoughts on this? Oh boy, this thing.
Stay away from this fucking movie. Like, if you have the sort of tolerance I do, this movie will piss you off. Look up clips online if you're curious, particularly with the dwarf scenes, but other than that, just stay the fuck away from this movie. It is not worthy of being a Snow White film. I mean, it has some good points, but they are just buried so deep beneath all the awfulness. Just don't give yourself the headache. Watch something much better, please.
I'm still confused. It's like, what is it trying to do? And then, it's trying to be one thing, and then it does another, and then there's a Bollywood ending, and then they do a Bollywood dance at the end. And what? It just raises too many questions.
This film is just not worth your time. Avoid it. There are other things you could spend your time doing. There are better things. There are video games that you could play. You could watch Fast and the Furious. There are better things to do with your time than waste it with this film. Unfortunately, I will never get that time back, and I will never get those nightmares to end. But you don't have to. We meter out the shit, so you guys do not have to watch it.
We suffer on your behalf. Worship us.
Mirror Mirror, do not watch it. End of story. Do something else. I don't know, rent a dog. I don't know.
Play with its turds. It'll be more interesting and fun and engaging than this.
Do something else. With all of that being said, thank you guys so much for tuning in. We have enjoyed today's episode of Elseworlds month, even though we did suffer quite a bit. But I had a lot of fun today because we had one of our more interesting episodes, I think. We will see you guys next time for hopefully a better movie. Who knows? I might like Snow White and the Huntsman. Probably not, but who knows? In any case, I am Zenith will rule.
I'm Kat MacBerry.
I'm Eric Y2Staller.
And thank you guys so much for watching this episode of the Disney Debate. If you like what you see, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, leave a comment in the box, just below the video. It takes 5 seconds. Let us know how we're doing, whether you like this or hate this. Just give a piece of advice or just let us know what you guys think of Mirror Mirror, or if you like Elseworlds month, what you want us to do in the future. With all that being said, thank you guys again, and we will see you next time for hopefully better things.
TTFN, ta-ta for now. Quack!
And just remember, if a movie is shit, don't watch this movie. Don't watch it.
Throw it in the garbage. Set it on fire. Throw it into a black hole, where it'll disappear into oblivion.
Thank you for watching the Media Meltdown. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more awesome videos. And if you like what you see, show your support on the Patreon page at patreon.com/Media Meltdown. See you all next time on the Media Meltdown.
So yeah, Snow White, sorry. So, Mirror Mirror, don't watch it. I can't talk.